If you're wanting to reduce lower limb injuries, then there are two exercises you definitely want to be doing. We are going through what they are, how to do them properly and in the best way, and progressions and regressions for each. Hi, my name's Rob from AMR Physio, and both of these exercises have evidence around their benefits for people who regularly play sport, but they're still well worth doing even if only doing activities recreationally. The first one is a Nordic Curl, which will help to minimize hamstring injuries. And as hamstring injuries are one of the most common non-contact injuries in sport, it's worth having an exercise in your program that's been shown it can reduce hamstring injuries by 51%. Now, a little context to that, this was from a study back in 2017 and even followed up with a review in 2019 in a really popular journal, and Nordics became all the rage. This was, however, questioned in terms of some of the limitation in methods, and that it only primarily assessed soccer players, and as with most research, suggests that actually more research is needed in this. This simmered the excitement for Nordics, but for some reason, as humans, if something comes out saying that's not quite as good as we initially thought, people then want to abandon it altogether, ignoring the fact that it can still play a big part in a program. We did the same thing with core training for back pain. It was deemed as really good for helping back pain. Then, studies came out to say, well, it's not better than doing this other type of exercise. So it then gets abandoned. But if it's not better, it doesn't mean it's bad or it doesn't help. It just means that both can help. And the same applies to Nordic curls. There is no denying they are a great exercise, especially for building eccentric strength into the hamstring, and that's where the majority of injuries take place. So with that out of the way, let's look at the best way to do it. If you've ever tried to do this properly, it is a really hard exercise to be doing. The classic way is to have the legs locked in place. Now this can be done by someone else holding your feet still, a machine if you have one, but most gyms tend not to, so you can actually do it on a lat pull down machine onto a bench, or use a really heavy barbell to keep you in place. Then, typically, it's lowering slowly and then pushing yourself back up from the floor. The biggest mistake people tend to make with this is not keeping the hips forward. Ideally, you're keeping the body in a straight line, but it's a lot easier when breaking at the hips. So this is what people tend to do. If that's happening, you have two options for how to approach the exercise. Number one is eccentric overload. So this is where you just concentrate on the lowering part. You keep the hips as far forward as you can and slowly lower the body until you can't hold it anymore, and then catch yourself, break at the hips and return back to the starting position, and then repeat. Most injuries occur in this eccentric portion for hamstrings, so building this strength up is never going to be a bad thing. Number two is doing it with a concentric portion. This is where you're actively lifting yourself back up. This is commonly done by doing the lowering phase and then doing a push-up to help get back to the top position. The problem with this is, depending on how hard you press, depends on how much you'll then have to contract the hamstrings, which can be different for every rep. A better way of doing this is having a surface in front of you, have your arms straight, and as soon as your fingers touch, then return to the start position, making sure you haven't pushed back with your arms at all. Have the distance as far as you can keep the eccentric form without breaking at the hip, and maintain the same position on the way back up. This is likely to be a pretty small movement if you're doing it right, but you'll definitely feel those hamstrings working. Whichever you decide, go for 3 sets of 6 to 8 reps once a week. The second exercise to be working on is the Copenhagen Adductor exercise. This is to help in reducing groin injuries. Groin injuries have been shown to be more common where there is less strength in the adductor muscles, and this exercise has been shown to help with that change. And we are going through how to do it with progressions and regressions. Normally you do this with someone holding your leg. However, if you're by yourself, you can do this at different levels. Find something you can put your leg on and get your other leg under. Then, to adjust difficulty, start with the easiest, going to the hardest. You can start with your knee on it and your other foot on the floor, then with your foot on it and still your other leg on the floor. The next step from that is your knee on it with the other leg lifted, and the final stage is the foot on it with the other leg lifted. And you can build this up. It's easiest with the knee on and hardest with the foot on. And if you're wanting to progress this even further, you can increase the height of the surface. So you're putting the foot higher, which will increase the stretch and range that the adductor's needing to work. Add both of these into regular training to help maximize condition of the leg and reduce the chance of injury.